My name is Andrew White, CEO and co-founder of Char or Char Technologies. What we do, we heat stuff up without oxygen. So high temperature, 900 degrees. Pyrolysis just means without oxygen. And so what that looks like is this slide. I'll come back to the last one. And we take things like wood waste. So we're talking about tree tops, tree limbs, bark, all the stuff that's been piled up in the forest after harvesting that dried out and burned this last summer, that type of waste material, as well as the waste material from harvesting. So sawmills and the like, they produce some waste when they're turning a round log into a rectangular piece of dimensional lumber. About 20% of each tree winds up as waste, and that's the material we take and we process. So we heat it up 950 degrees without oxygen. What that does is it cracks that wood apart into two products. One is a carbon, we call it a biocoal. The other is a gas, which we can use as renewable natural gas. So I'll talk a little bit more about that, but it's fully interchangeable with natural gas in the pipeline. We go back a slide. This is our existing facility. So this is in Thorold, Ontario, which is just outside of St. Catharines, right across the lake from Toronto. That's our facility that's currently operating. To give you a sense of scale, the people standing in front give you the scale. That plant can produce about 500 kilograms per hour of our biocoal. Our commercial plant that we're in the midst of building can produce 3.5 tons per hour. So it's a little bit bigger. It's going to be at the same site. One of the important things for those of you who are understanding or have a background in bioenergy types of projects is that feedstock supply is one of the most crucial elements of these projects. Without wood, the plant can't operate. And so what we've done with our projects, and I'll talk about some of the other projects in a moment, but we've partnered with either First Nations communities in our projects in Northern Ontario or large waste management companies like Walker Environmental in Southern Ontario, where they become equity partners in the project co and they are the feedstock supplier. So they've got a pretty strong incentive to make sure those projects continue to get this wood feedstock that we need to keep the plants operational. Strategic partnerships to us are really important. So we have it on the feedstock side, but we also have it on the offtake side, so the outputs of our products. So this slide I borrowed from ArcelorMittal's Global Climate Action Report. And really the important thing to point out here is that they've recognized pyrolysis, which is our technology, which is front and center from their Climate Action Report, as a critical piece of how to create carbon neutral steel. So not only have they identified this as a process, in July, they invested $6.6 million in Char at 60 cents a share. They also brought to the table a offtake agreement. So they're the owners of Dofasco, which is the steel mill in Hamilton, which is right beside our plant in St. Catharines. So they brought an offtake agreement. They're already buying that material from us. So we've been working with them since 2017 to develop our biocarbons, our biocoals, to make sure that they can be drop-in replacements, that they don't have to invest in any infrastructure to use the product. We can just deliver it. They put it into their system. So they've tested it, they've validated it, they've given us an offtake, and they've invested in the company. So for us, that's pretty strong validation that sort of one of the world's premier steel companies is behind this. From their investments, they've invested in a few different companies. We're the only ones globally that they've invested in that make biocoal. So they've seen what's out there in the world and they've found that we're leading the pack, which again is phenomenal validation for us and all the work we've been doing. Biocoal is one piece. We always make two products. So we always make the coal and we always make a gas. So for renewable natural gas, the important points are that it is a product that sells at a premium. So Énergir in Quebec and Fortis BC will pay between $21 and $45 a gigajoule. Delivered to a house in Ontario, consumers pay $4 to $5 a gigajoule. Just to give you a sense of the magnitude of the premium that these gas utilities will pay. And the reason for that is both of those jurisdictions, Quebec and British Columbia, have renewable natural gas mandates. So they must have a certain amount of renewable gas in their pipelines by either 2025 or 2030. The supply of that gas is pretty small, and so they're forced to keep bringing the price up to entice other suppliers to get in there. The other nice thing from a project perspective is they'll give 20-year offtake agreements at those prices with some inflation adjustment. So we can really de-risk the offtake on the biocoal side through our partners with ArcelorMittal, and through the gas side with these 20-year offtake agreements. So the projects become very financeable from an output risk perspective. The pipeline of projects that we have lined up gives us a pathway to produce 3 million gigajoules per year. We didn't just choose that number arbitrarily. It is what our output's going to be, but it's a nice fence post to mark against, because if you look at the renewable natural gas sector, BP bought Archaea Energy, who were producing 3 million gigajoules for $4.2 billion. So it gives a bit of a valuation metric on when you're producing that kind of gas, what do the large industrial players value that gas production at? An important point for us at Char as well is how do you produce renewable natural gas? Most of it comes from organic waste. I won't get too much into it, but it's all this stuff in gray. Agricultural biomass, manure, food waste, etc. In Quebec, so this is a study from the government of Quebec that WSP Deloitte undertook. And what we're showing is that in 2030, according to this study, this typical renewable natural gas production pathway will produce or could produce up to 25 petajoules. So a petajoule is 1 million gigajoules, just a unit of energy for our purposes here. When you look at adding woody residual material, it goes from 25 to 140. And this is all material that is residual. So non-merchantable wood is the tree that comes to the sawmill that's got a kink in it or too many knots, or they just can't value it. Harvesting residuals is those tree tops and tree limbs. And processing residuals are things like bark and sawdust and chips that come off of the processing. So there is a ton of material out there for our purposes, and everyone else is in that kind of little gray area, and we're leading the pack here on the blue. So that's a really good place to be. We've also been quite successful at non-dilutive funding. So in December, we were able to announce 12 million in government funding. Since 2022, it's been 14. Most of that is in non-dilutive grants, non-dilutive, non-repayable grants. The rest has been interest-free loans up until now. This is one of the announcements. So this is the Minister of Natural Resources in the province of Ontario, Graydon Smith, at our site in Thorold, talking about the funding. So as our projects move forward, the most recent federal budget was pretty heavy in industrial decarbonization and climate mitigation. And so we do see the continued ability to raise funding, non-dilutive funding for our projects. Our projects aren't reliant on it. The IRRs of the projects work with traditional project funding, but if we can get it 50% financed for free, we're certainly going to take advantage of that opportunity. And as we talk about projects and scaling up and how we're going to do it, this is what our pipeline of projects looks like. So Thorold is the one we got the government funding for that we're in process of building. And what we're showing here is a rollout where we can get initial revenue from these projects very quickly. So what we're showing in Thorold is 2024, 5 million a year in revenue. That's from the biocoal production. And then the 2025 number adds 15 million for the gas. And so each of our projects, because they're modular, we can roll them out in 18 months. All of the equipment is factory built. It's always exactly the same. It's just assembled on site. And then as we roll out the project, we can get it producing some revenue while we're building the rest of the equipment and getting the rest of the equipment installed. So that 18-month cycle is really, really important. All of these projects, Thorold is an exception. It's about a $35 million capex. The other projects are greenfield. They'll be about 45 million. But the important point is all of these projects can be funded at the project level. So Char, as a corporation, isn't going to the market to raise 45 million per project to get them built. We're raising nothing to get them built because we can get 70% project leverage, government funding, and equity partners at the project co. So that's the planned rollout right now. What you can see is that each of these projects has reasonable revenue. The EBITDA is about 8 million per project. So as we deploy, if the ability to raise equity in the project level is a little bit slower, we can use revenue from previous projects to grow. We just need to space the projects out a little bit more than what we're showing here. So we've got a couple different pathways to make sure we're funding the projects without having to raise that kind of capital in the market. So to kind of summarize what I just said, this is our Thorold project. So 35 million in CapEx, 20 million in revenue, 15 of that is from the renewable natural gas with that 20-year offtake. 5 million is from that biocoal that we've got contracted to ArcelorMittal, their facility Dofasco in Hamilton. That gives us about 8 million in EBITDA from the project, or about a 29% project IRR on an unlevered basis. So this really allows us to demonstrate the commercial technology. We've got the offtake partners, we've got the commercial partners, and really it's attracted a lot of these great strategics. When we look at the capital structure, about 17% is insider ownership, so we've still got a fair bit of interest in the company. With Arcelor's investment, they came in at 12%, and at the time of this deck being put together, we had a 48 million basic market cap. And finally, just a little bit on the key leaders of the company. So I founded the company in 2011. So this came out of grad studies at the University of Toronto. So we went from 2010 little vials in a fume hood to 2018 commercializing our demonstration plant, which I showed a picture of, to now building out our commercial plant, which will be producing carbon in 2024 and gas at the end of 2024. James is one of the directors. He's actually here today. He was part of the original CPC shell that we went public with in 2016, and still part of that insider ownership. So I think unlike a lot of CPC stories, the original CPC founders are still quite involved in the company and are good shareholders and very supportive. Galen, some of you may have met or seen or been around. He's our stakeholder relations manager. And then on the other side of the column here, Mark has a lot of experience. He was with other publicly traded companies. He's been in the market space. Lewis came from Nova Scotia, where he worked in the large utilities. And Jameson, sitting over here, is our capital markets advisor and supporting us in that front. So thank you very much.